Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In this video, I'm going to explain how to register an account on StockTrak and how to set up a class in case if you want to use StockTrak as a project that you assign to your students in the courses you are teaching. I hope you will find this video useful, and hopefully later on we can share our experiences to improve our usage of StockTrak during the educational process. The first step is to register an account or to register for a professor account since you are an instructor. Here you will find some information or introductory information about StockTrak to explain what is StockTrak, what is available, and also to explain what are the different service levels they offer and the cost associated with each level. And at the bottom you will find a link to start creating your professor account. So you fill in here your username, you create a password, you add some other required information, and once you are done you click on submit and you are ready to set up a class. When you log in to StockTrak, you will be taken to the admin dashboard. So in the admin dashboard, it provides you some summary information, how many students registered, or how many accounts registered in your class or classes, what are the number of trades, what is the ranking of the different portfolios that are in the classes you are teaching or you have already set up. Here you will see if in case you created an assignment, how students are progressing in the assignment. Also, if you want to send some announcements, you can do that here. If you want to open a dialogue or a forum for students to discuss, you can start a conversation here. Here you will see what are the top traded securities or instruments in the different classes you are teaching. And here you will see the list of different classes that this dashboard is related to. Okay, so next let's see how to register a new class. So from admin you go to register a new class and you start with a question about what is the class subject. So in my case the class subject is derivatives, so I'm going to use derivatives. You can copy from a previous class if you already have set up a class before and you don't want to enter the same information again. This option here helps you to avoid wasting your time. Then we click on next. Here are the different service levels that your students can subscribe to. In my case, I would choose the service, the silver level, because it's more appropriate for the class I'm teaching. Here there is an option that you can add a buy and hold account, which will cost an extra $6 in addition to the price showing here to your students. Some courses they want their students to compare between, for example, buy and hold strategy relative to an actively trading strategy. So this option here makes this type of comparison much easier. and then you type the class name. In my case here, it's Fin 361 class B, because I have two sections and I already set up for the first section. The number of students in my class is about 40. Here, who is responsible for payments? Usually students are responsible for payments. Now, when you want the registration to start and end, in my case, I want the registration will starts on the 27th of September and ends within one week, to push students to sign up for an account on StockTrak, because if you don't push your students, sometimes you know that some of them or a minority of them will procrastinate. So to give them a push, it's better to restrict the timing of the registration to be a few days or a week at maximum. Now, here you set up when the trading starts and when it ends. So in my case, I wanted to start on the 4th of October and I wanted to end in December 5th. If you want to enable forum, then you can control that here. Next, it will ask you here about the academic level of the students or the class you are teaching. In my case, I'm teaching undergraduate students, and the course is financial derivatives. And for informational purposes, you can choose the author of the book you are teaching. In my case, I'm teaching the book authored by Hull. Next here, there are some parameters to control the portfolios and the asset class or the security class that your students can enter into. So here the currency, since the US dollar is the most popular currency, I'm going to stick with it. Here you can choose the initial cash balance your students can have. For the purpose of my course, I will choose 5 million. Here, these two parameters will restrict the characteristic of the security your students will enter into. So, for example, some instructors, they don't want their students to enter into penny stocks, so they can restrict that by setting a minimum stock price for buying and a minimum stock price for shorting. Here you set the percentage the interest rate your students will earn if they keep their cash in their account. So for me, I don't want to motivate them to keep cash, so I will lower the interest earned. And if you want to allow your students to take a loan or buy on a margin, so here you can set the interest charged. Here are some controls related to what could be displayed. So if you want to display the Sharpe ratio ranking, you can choose this here. If you want to display the alpha beta ranking, also you can check that here. If you want to allow trading on a margin, that's also under your control. If you want your students to start with a pre-populated portfolio, then you can do that here. If you want to control whether or not your students can short sell or day trade, that's also available here. If you want to make portfolios public, and this option will allow participants to view each other's trades, open positions and trading notes, Personally don't prefer to make this available because some students might avoid putting some effort and they will mimic or imitate their colleagues, and we don't want to encourage that. Here it's your choice to make your professor account appear in the class ranking, so you will be given also an account where you also can trade. So here you can choose to keep your professor account to be shown in the class ranking or not. This feature is very important. Here, whether or not you require your students to make trade notes, it's important that your students justify what they are doing, because if you want to track how your students are performing or what they are doing without the trade notes, it might be a bit challenging. So I highly encourage to add this option, but more importantly, you have to explain to your students that whenever they place a trade, they have to explain what this trade is aiming to do, or for what class of asset are they buying or selling. This will make it easy for you to keep track of what your students are doing. Now, this option here is related to whether or not you want to restrict your students from entering into instruments that are thinly or not actively traded. It happened to me that sometimes students want to place an order on instruments that are thinly traded, or the volume is almost is zero. So the system here will not process this or will not allow this transaction, and they might be frustrated because they place orders and these orders are not executed, especially if they are market orders. So some instructors, they are strict in terms of allowing their students to enter into not actively or not liquid instruments. So this is under your control. In my case, I want to be lenient with them, and I will allow them to place orders even if the size of the order is relatively large compared to the daily volume. Now, this option here, if you want to limit the number of trades per day, and if you want to display badges. Now, these badges are like the nicknames your students create for themselves, so you can control whether or not their badges will appear in the rankings or no. Now, next is the parameters about the security or the asset class you want to allow your students to enter into, and some also some parameters related to the commission they will be charged. So in my case, if students are going to trade equities, I want them to be charged as 0.15% as a commission, and the position limit here will restrict your students from placing all the cash in this type of asset class, so you can control that. In my case, I'm not really strict, because I want them from each period to do a certain task. So and sometimes these tasks are related to a single asset class. So I will set that into a 100. Now the same thing here. Now the position limit here is related to a single security or a single ETF. So that this control how much you allow them to place in a security or an ETF, and here how much you allow them to place in equities. So if they can, if you want to, you want them to, if you want to force them to into more than one asset class, then you can control that from here. For example, 75% in equities, 25% in bonds, or 50% in equities, 20% in futures, and so on. So for me, I will keep it 100%. And pay attention that under equities, there are stocks and ETFs. So you can exclude one of them if you feel the need to do so. Also, you have the choice of the exchanges. In my case, I want to choose all available exchanges. Here, if you want to include mutual funds or bonds, and in my case, they are not relevant. What's important in my case is to include options, and the commission I want is 0.05 cents per share in a contract. And in terms of position limit, I also want to keep that within 100%. You also can, if you want to include futures, that's available. Here you need to agree that the CME group will have access to the information, your information on StockTrak. I don't see why I will not disagree. Also, I want the commission to be 0.5 cents per unit in a contract, just to avoid making the commission too high, and that might affect their performance. Also, maximum 100%. Here you can choose whatever exchange that trades futures and even options. Here, if you want to include futures on options also, so to be consistent with the previous settings, I'm going to do that. Here, if you want to include forex, and here, if you want to include spot transactions. If you want to buy commodities from the spot market, that could be available here. But in my case, I want that to be limited to 25% or 50%. And the commission is $5 per trade. And 50%. Okay. طيب. Now, next here, if you want to create an assignment for the course you are teaching, there are different assignments that relates to different aspects of finance and even to different levels of knowledge. So for example, if I choose options and derivatives tutorials, you will see that there are sorry, just a second. So here it's an article about options, and there's a video available, some examples, explanation about some strategies that involve options, and how students can place trades, or if they want to trade options, how they can place their trades on StockTrak. And finally, there is a quiz. You can also, I think, add some questions here, so your students at the end will have to answer these questions. Now, in my case, it's not something that I want to do now. Probably I will do it later, so I can skip this step. So once this Now here it's a confirmation that the class has been set. Now you can also here choose whether or not you want 1 or 2 demo accounts that will show in the class ranking. Now this link you can use to share with your students to sign up for an account on StockTrak, and here are the summary of the details you set in the during the setting process. Now we are done with setting up an account. I want to end this video by showing you some useful resources that you can refer to if you decide to use StockTrak. The first resource is if you go to the from admin and admin resources, you will find some class project ideas. So you can view what other instructors used as a basis for projects that use StockTrak, and you will find different topics. For example, you will find an idea that relates to portfolio management, an idea that relates to investments, economics, derivatives, mutual funds, and so on. One interesting idea is socially responsible investing, and so on. So you can, for example, click on one of them. It will give you the details of this project, which you can use or modify as you see fit. And another important resource that you can also share with your students is in the learning. You go to more articles here, and one important article is the StockTrak student user guide. So you can share with your students a link to this user guide, so it will show them how to create their accounts, how they place trades, how to interpret the dashboard that appears to them, how to see the class rules, and other very useful information. So how to place trades. So I think it's very important to share this with your students to make the adoption of StockTrak smooth and with a minimum possible of troubles and problems. That's it. I hope you will find this video useful, and I apologize if it took a little bit long, but I think using these types of platforms will enhance our students' understanding. From my experience, I taught. I started actually a StockTrak project last semester, and it was very interesting to observe how my students identified gaps in their understanding, how it enhanced their learning. So if you would like to share your experience and how we can develop our usage of this platform, that will be very helpful. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.